Howdy and welcome to Roughlead. Today's story is called The Man Under the Hat. If you like to keep a pen or a piece of paper nearby, you might find something worth holding on to. Now settle in. It begins like this. The July sun set high over the valley. Even the horses stood in the shade. A farmer loaded crates of potatoes onto his wagon and wiped the sweat from his brow. Then he adjusted his hat. Minutes later, he adjusted it again. By noon, sweat soaked through his shirt. Still, he never took the hat off. Not in the shade, not while eating, not even when nobody was watching. His name was Scott Turner. Most people in the county knew him. He owned a small farm a few miles east of town. He grew potatoes, onions, beans, and whatever else the season allowed. He paid his debts on time, worked hard, kept to himself. The kind of man nobody disliked. The kind of man nobody really knew. Every Saturday, Scott hauled his harvest to the weekly farmers' market. The market sat beside the railroad tracks where rangers, farmers, merchants and travelers crossed paths. It should have been his favorite day of the week. Instead, he dreaded it. Not because of the work, because of the people. Every glance felt like judgment. Every laugh felt directed at him. Every whispered conversation sounded like it might be about him. By afternoon, he packed up earlier than usual. On the way home, he took a familiar turn and followed a dirt road toward Frank's farm. Frank was repairing a water trough when Scott arrived. A hammer rested in one hand, a loose board in the other. Scott leaned against the fence. "Can I ask you something?" Frank nodded. "How do you stop caring what people think?" Frank looked across the pasture. A scarecrow stood in the middle of a cornfield. Its head hung crooked. A crow sat on top of it. Neither seemed bothered by the other. Frank watched for a moment. Then he shrugged. Most things don't notice they're being looked at. He drove a nail into the board. The conversation appeared finished. Scott waited for more. Nothing came. Eventually, he climbed back into his wagon and headed home. The whole day he wondered what kind of answer that was supposed to be. The following Saturday, he returned to the market. He tried something different. Instead of watching people watch him, he focused on his work. He greeted customers, talked about crops, asked questions. For a while, it felt easier, a little bit lighter. By noon, he had sold nearly half his produce. Hope quietly settled in. Maybe Frank had been right. Maybe people weren't paying as much attention as he thought. Then, 3 boys passed his stand. One nudged another. "Think he ever takes that thing off?" The others laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough. Scott felt his stomach sink. The old shame returned all at once. By the end of the afternoon, he packed his wagon in silence and headed home. That night, he sat alone in front of a mirror. A long time, he stared at his reflection. Then removed the hat. The viewer saw what no one else had. A large birthmark spread across part of his scalp. Years of thinning hair had left much of it exposed. Nothing frightening, nothing unusual, just something he had spent years believing made him look foolish. As a boy, other children had teased him. As a young man, he learned to hide it. Then hiding became a habit, and habit became a prison. He placed the hat back on his head, even alone. The next Saturday arrived hotter than the last. The market bustled from sunrise onward. Scott worked through the morning. Customers came and went. The heat grew heavier and heavier. By noon, sweat ran into his eyes. His head trapped every bit of it. He wiped his forehead, adjusted the brim, then stopped. Across the market, nobody was looking at him. A woman argued about the price of eggs. A ranger loaded feed into a wagon. A child chased a dog between the stalls. Everyone carried their own concerns, their own worries, their own lives. For a moment he remembered Frank's words. Most things don't notice when they're being looked at. Slowly, Scott removed the hat. His hands trembled. He expected something, a stare, a laugh, a whisper. Nothing happened. The women still argued about eggs. The ranger still loaded feed. The child still chased the dog. The world continued exactly as before. A few people glanced his way, then looked elsewhere. The moment passed. Just another moment among thousands. Scott stood there beneath the summer sky. The sun warmed the top of his head. The wind touched skin that had hidden for years. For the first time in a long while, he felt strangely exposed and strangely free. Late that afternoon, as the market closed, an older farmer stopped beside him. The man scratched his beard. Hot day, Scott smiled. Sure is. The farmer pointed at the hat resting on the table. Probably don't need that thing today. Scott looked at it, then laughed softly. No, he didn't. He didn't. The thing we hide from the world often matters far more to us than it does to the world. What are your thoughts on these stories? Leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to hear more stories from Frank, step a little closer to the fire. Like, share and subscribe.